doesn't consider it in the bag. He's speaking to colleagues all throughout this morning. We'll find out just after lunch whether or not this will go to a membership round, and the time will tell. So no, I don't never assume anything.
Business commentator Declan Curry says the markets have rallied as Rishi Sunak remains the clear favourite.
The pound had a big surge after Boris Johnson announced he was pulling out of the contest to become new Conservative Party leader, and the long-term interest rate that traders demand on the bond markets has fallen sharply this morning. There is an assumption in some parts of the city that if Rishi Sunak becomes Prime Minister, that Mr Hunt will stay as Chancellor and Mr Sunak will give his support to plans to stabilise the national finances.
Also this morning, BT and Openreach workers are staging a fresh strike in a long-running dispute over pay. Members of the Communication Workers Union, including 999 call handlers, are walking out for 24 hours. A man and a woman have been charged with the murder of a man from North London who was last seen over a year ago. Frank McKeever, who was 63, was last seen walking in Highbury in August 2021. New research suggests cities have driven growth in house prices this year, outstripping suburbs. Halifax says property prices in Britain's cities have typically grown by 9.2%, compared with 7.9% in surrounding areas. The lender thinks it's partly down to people returning to the office. In the city a short time ago, the FTSE 100 was trading down 28 points at 69.41, and the pound buys $1.13 and €1.15. LBC weather: outbreaks of rain will clear to a mix of sunshine and showers, some heavy in the south and west, rain continuing in the far north, a high of 17 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Simon.
Must be 18 or over.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call Keir. Put your questions to the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, now. 0345 6060 973. This is LBC.
Yes, good morning. 2 minutes after 9 on Monday, October the 24th. Put your calls to the next leader of the Labour Party, possibly the next Prime Minister. The bookies are right, but I'm sure Sir Keir will address that in his own time. He's on the studio opposite me now. Thank you for coming in.
Good morning, Ed.
Good morning to you, Sir Keir. Obviously, I think you can probably anticipate the first question. The big dog is staying in his kennel. Boris Johnson is not running. Let me be honest. The sentiment when you first heard, what was your first sentiment on hearing that?
My first sentiment, I'm afraid, was that I thought he didn't have the numbers, and that's why he was pulling out. But when he first said that he was going to run, and everybody was sort of rallying round, I did put my head in my hands and think, so really, we're going to go from the Prime Minister who just crashed the economy, let's go back to the guy that only 3 or 4 months ago most of his front benchers were saying was unfit for office. It was never going to work, I don't think. But look, I mean, to be honest, Nick, I think, the less time now spent on this sort of chaotic, ridiculous circus at the top of the Tory party, the better. Millions of people are really worried about paying their bills this winter. Now they've got mortgage payments that are higher than they might otherwise be. They're fed up to the back teeth, and I think they should have a say. I don't think they should be locked out of this. I think, a change at the top of the Tory party is not what we need. We need a general election. So people can choose. Do you want to carry on with this chaos, or do you want stability under a Labour government?
Bit of relief, though. I mean, you hear what you say about the man who crashed the economy, also the man who delivered an extraordinary successful victory, extraordinary in terms of how much success he delivered for the Conservatives at the last election. Must be a bit of a relief.
No, Nick, I mean, I have to say...
Not an ounce of relief.
Remember back to the local elections we had earlier this year in May, people were turning out because they... I think had worked out who Boris Johnson really is, and his popularity was very low, their polling was low, and you had those huge by-election swings really as a direct result of his leadership. So, I concluded very quickly he was unfit for office, but it wasn't so much me, it was his own party. What did we have? 62 resignations from his own front bench because they thought he was unfit. But look, we could... we've had what now? This will be the fifth Prime Minister in 6 years.
Yeah.
We've had 4 Chancellors in 4 months. That isn't the country we are. That is utter chaos. And I think many people listening would be saying, oh, for heaven's sake, at least give us the choice between a stable Labour Party coming in to govern the country, get the economy under control and actually deliver for working people, or carry on with this utter chaos.
Lastly, coming to the calls, John, you'll be the caller. Final one from me. How do you view the prospect of squaring up to Rishi Sunak at PMQs?
Absolutely fine. I mean, I don't know whether it'll be him. Obviously, there's a few hours to run. Although it looks to me like he's obviously the front runner at the moment. So we'll see. But as I say, as I've said, Nick, many times, I don't mind who I'm up against there. I will make my case for a positive Labour government to steer us out of this chaos.
OK, let's get to the first caller. Thanks, Sir Keir. John is in Inverness. John, you're on the radio. Go ahead.
Hi, John.
Hi, good morning, Sir Keir. I just wanted to ask, given that you were once a passionate believer in remaining in the EU, is it time for a change of heart again? At one time you actually called for a second referendum, and now you're saying you don't want to go back into the customs union or the single market. Don't you think the red wall seats that got lost last time could be persuaded to have a change of heart, given the chaotic situation we're in just now, much of which you could put down to Brexit?
Let's put that straight to Sir Keir.
John, it's a straight no from me. We're not going back into the EU. That isn't the position of my party. That isn't what an incoming Labour government would do. We do think that we should make Brexit work. I think all that's happened so far is we've got Brexit done in the sense that we're out of the EU. I think we've got to make it work now, and that does mean reducing those barriers to trade. It means fixing the problems in relation to the protocol in Northern Ireland and having more cooperation on security issues. But, John, on your fundamental question of going back into the EU, it's a straight no. We had a vote in 2016. We do not want to go back in. We want to make Brexit work.
What is the solution to Northern Ireland, do you think, Sir Keir?
Well, I think there are a number of things that we could do. I went over to Belfast and Dublin, actually, to talk this through with businesses. The businesses in Northern Ireland say, look, we don't much like the protocol, but we're working with it, and we've spent a lot of money now making it work, so don't rip it up. But what we've got, this is the business community in Northern Ireland, is a 14-point set of changes that we could make that would make it easier to trade in Northern Ireland. I went through that list. I think they're all practical and pragmatic. We should get on with that rather than saying we're going to rip up the protocol. In Northern Ireland and in Dublin, the businesses say, look, we've put the money into the changes now, and you're really suggesting we're going back to square one by ripping it up. They're so against it. It's really powerful stuff.
John, thank you for the call. Fiona's in Kendal. Fiona, you're on the radio. Go ahead. Good morning.
Hello.
Hi, Fiona.
Hello, Keir. I want to ask you, Keir, that in the light of Sir David King's horrible prediction that what we do over the next 3 or 4 years is going to determine the future of humanity, as a mum or a grandma, I'm absolutely terrified of what I see happening all over the world. And I know the Labour Party have policy of banning fracking and no more new oil and gas. But I've joined, I'm a big supporter of Just Stop Oil, because they're saying no new oil and gas. And they want you to not take any more oil and gas from fields that already have consent. So could you please reassure me that you are taking Sir David King's prediction seriously? And if you were Prime Minister, you would really act on that, and there would be genuinely no more new oil and gas, as Just Stop Oil are asking for.
Well, Fiona, let me just deal with Just Stop Oil, because I think they're wrong. I think their action is wrong. I think, I particularly think about the images we've seen of ambulances coming down the road and not being able to get through because people have glued themselves to the road. Fiona, my mum was very ill all of her life. She was in those ambulances when she was alive, and there'll be other families listening to this who are in the same situation. I think it's arrogant. It's arrogant. Now, the underlying question, Fiona, that you put is really important, because I do think that the action we take in the next few years, probably the next 10 years or so, will be absolutely determinative. We won't get to net zero in 2015 if we don't take the right measures now. And that's why, Fiona, we've set out what we call our Green Prosperity Plan, which is to absolutely go for renewables. Renewables, by the way, are 9 times cheaper than gas, so there's no argument for not going for renewables. I think that we can have clean power by 2030, and that will do 4 things, Fiona, which are really important. Firstly, it'll bring our bills down, desperately needed for families this winter. Secondly, it'll give us security. If we use renewables here in Britain, then we're not exposed to the international market. Putin doesn't get to put his foot on our throats. Third thing is there's a huge next generation of jobs bound up in renewables. And the fourth thing is we've, of course, got to be serious about our climate obligations. So we've brought that together. I think this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity, Fiona. So I'm absolutely up for that. I think it's arrogant of those gluing themselves to the road to think they're the only people that have got the answer to this. They haven't got the answer. And I don't know how they can look in the eye of the families who've got someone in the back of an ambulance. They certainly wouldn't be able to look me in the eye if it was my mum, late mum now, sadly, who was in that ambulance.
To Fiona's point, Sir Keir, no new oil or gas licences. Can you give that pledge now?
Yes, I can. We accept there's got to be a transition. So where there is oil and gas already being yielded, that needs to continue as part of the transition. But no new sites, no new fields to be opened. We need to transition to renewables. We can do it. We can double our onshore wind, we can triple our solar energy, and we can quadruple our offshore wind. And the sooner we do that, the better. I do think that new nuclear as well and hydrogen are part of the equation.
Lastly on this, when you hear some senior police officers say they don't have the necessary powers to lift these people off the carriageway or the roundabout or wherever it might be within minutes, what is, referencing, of course, your previous job, what is the reality?
Oh, look, there are the powers to do it. And obviously I was the Director of Public Prosecutions for 5 years. There were a lot of demonstrations and protests then. It wasn't the lack of law to do it, it was the decision making. We didn't have any cases that came across my desk where I said, well, it's obviously wrong, but we haven't got the laws to prosecute. We always had the laws available. That's why I think some of the position of the government recently has been about posturing rather than actually taking this case forward.
So we don't need these new laws that the government talk of. We've got everything necessary.
Well, what we were pushing for in that was longer sentences for those who are gluing themselves to roads and motorways, because that's where you're putting lives at risk. We didn't get that through, but that's what I wanted.
And that's what you'd want in the future?
Yeah.
OK. Thank you, Fiona. Vicky's in St Albans. Vicky, you're on the radio. Morning to you.
Hello, good morning. Good morning, Sir Keir.
Vic, my wife's called Vic, so
there we go.
Just wondered if she was calling me up to say, where are you?
Oh, I'd love to get that call. Oh, that'd be worth a lot. Go ahead, Vicky.
I'm a former Labour Party member, and I've always voted Labour all my life. And I'm concerned, really, about the party's stance on women's sex-based rights. There's some confusion over whether the party would or can use all women shortlists to select candidates. But I think the important question for me and a lot of the women that I know and women within Women's Rights Network want to know is, do you support all women shortlists? And if so, would someone like Eddie Izzard have a place on those shortlists?
Well, Vic, let me just set this out as a matter of principle, starting with perhaps the obvious that, for 99.9% of women, everything is a matter of biology, and I'm very, very supportive of that. We have been the party of equality for women for many, many years, and lots of the changes in the laws in relation to equality have been because of a Labour government. I also believe strongly in the Equality Act, and that means safe spaces for women. And I myself worked hard when I was Director of Public Prosecutions on issues of violence against women and girls. So I've seen firsthand how important that is. But Vicky, what I wouldn't leave out of account is there is a small percentage, a small group of people who do not identify with the gender that they were born into, and they go through a huge amount of stress. If you talk to some of the parents of teenagers who are confused and concerned and can't get the medical treatment they want, I think that we should be compassionate and we should recognise that we already have a law in place for gender recognition. that needs to be modernised. So that's in principle where I am on it, Vicky.
But her question, Vicky's key question was, would you be in favour of all women shortlists?
Well, we do have all women
shortlists.
Although there's some issue over all women shortlists, we've got nothing to do with this conversation, which is that once you've got, I think it's your 50% equality, then there's an argument about all women shortlists anyway. And so on that particular issue, Vicky, it's, as a Labour Party, because we have used all women shortlists to get now more than 50% of women, there's a legal opinion that says we can't use them anymore. This is a worry, actually, more generally, Vicky, because I think it might mean we'll have, we need to make sure that we keep promoting women coming through as candidates.
Would Eddie Izzard qualify to be on the Labour all-women shortlist?
Well, Nick, I'm not going to discuss individuals. Obviously, we'll look at each case as they come up, but I'm not going to discuss individuals on a programme like this.
Well, one of your colleagues has, Rosie Duffield, has said she would leave the Labour Party. Quotes, "I will not be a hypocrite. I won't lie down. I won't say that a man is a woman. Eddie Izzard is not a woman. I'm absolutely not the only Labour woman MP who will leave the party if Eddie Izzard gets to an all-women shortlist." So I ask again, in the view of the Labour leader, you're the leader of the party, can Eddie Izzard be on an all-women shortlist for the seat of Sheffield Central?
Well, Nick, I'm not going to discuss individual cases. I know Rosie Duffield's position. My position is, as I've set out, as I say, for 99.9% of women, it's a matter of biology. I completely support that. There is a small percentage...
So Eddie Izzard could qualify in your
struggle
view.
With their gender.
Indeed, of course.
And I'm not going to simply put that on one side. They are...
No, indeed.
And ignore that.
But Eddie Izzard could sit on an all-woman shortlist.
Well, Nick, I'm not going to discuss individual cases.
You just won't give me a comment on that?
I'm not going to discuss individual cases.
Vicky, thanks for the call. Let's go elsewhere. Actually, just up the road from St Albans, we go to Radlett, or down the road, I'm not sure. Sam in Radlett, go ahead. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Sir Keir. Good morning. Can I ask a simple yes or no? Do you support sort of the train strikes? I run a business and I'm getting people back to work after all the COVID and everything else. And then, of course, I go and have the train strikes. People can't get in. It affects my productivity, affects the economy, costing us millions, billions, whatever it may be. So do you support these people going out on strike, disrupting people's lives? And secondly, how would you go about trying to get these strikes sorted out?
Well, Sam, I think the government needs to get people around the table. I don't want strikes. They're hugely disruptive. For those who are on strike, they cost them money. They're very much a last resort. But what I do recognise is that for many people, including those who work on the railways, they're really struggling. They've been on, wages that have been stagnant for a long time. Prices are going through the roof. Whether you're working on the railways or elsewhere, this is going to be a very difficult, brutal winter. And therefore, I do think that there's a good case for people saying, I need a pay rise. But what I want to see from a government, and what you get from a Labour government, is getting people around the table to resolve the issues. In Wales, where we've got a Labour government, that's exactly what happened. Mark Drakeford got people around the table and resolved the issue. What I worry about with this government is that they actually want the strikes, they like the disruption because they want to make a political point instead of getting people around the table to negotiate it. I support the right to strike, but I don't want to see, whether it's the railway workers or nurses or anybody else, nobody wants to go on strike. It's a last resort that actually costs those who are on strike money as well as being obviously disruptive to the public. I want a grown-up government that sorts this out. The other thing I'd say, Sam, just briefly is, in the end, the only way to a sustainable pay rise is if you grow the economy. And we've had the biggest problem in the last 12 years is that the economy hasn't grown anything like it did under the last Labour government. That has to be the priority. And that's why we need a change of government. We need respect for the institutions like the OBR and the Bank of England that actually give us stability. We need a proper, credible plan for growth because in the end, a sustainable pay rise will only be available if we have growth under our economy.
The transport strikes bill is before the House at the moment, Sir Keir. The RMT describe it as autocratic. ASLIF says it won't work. Briefly, the points are a minimum service level must be in place during transport strikes. If not, the unions could lose legal protection. Employers will specify the number of staff required to make that service work. Unions must take reasonable steps to ensure an appropriate number of workers work on strike days. And workers who still take strike action could lose any cover from automatic dismissal? Sir Keir. Well, as many say that's like going back to pre-union legislation. It's like an autocratic country.
Well, it is, and the way through this is negotiating round the table. Those rail unions have worked in the past very strongly on issues of safety. They care very strongly about the railways. Get people around the table. Stop treating this as just a political dividing line. Get the country moving. Get people around the table. Negotiate a proper way forward.
OK. Would you ever go on a picket line, Sir Keir?
Well, I've been on a picket line.
Now as Labour leader, I'm so sorry.
No, I wouldn't. My job is to, as leader of the opposition, to make sure that we have a Labour government. If we do have a Labour government, I will be Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. It's my job to get people around the table, negotiate and settle issues. It's not my job to be on a picket line. And when I talk to trade union leaders, what they're concerned to know is, do you understand what the working people are going through? Do you understand the issues? And the answer to that is yes. I think, Christina McAnee from Unison has said, look, whether politicians are on the picket line is not my number one priority. My number one priority is, can we get a Labour government so we can actually put in place a better, regime for working people across the country?
But what if a senior colleague wanted to go on a picket line? Can they do that?
Well, I've said that they shouldn't. I do understand why people want to talk to those, particularly in their constituencies, who are taking action. We've got strong affiliations with the trade unions, but they're different jobs. A trade union leader's job is obviously...
So someone could visit a picket line, as long as they don't then give interviews.
The question that I have to answer, my focus and my mission is to usher in a Labour government. The single most important thing I can do for working people is to have a Labour government that will grow the economy, that will have an economy that's based on working people and usher in better rights and protections for them.
Then you hear one of your front benches on a railway picket line. How would you respond?
Well, it depends on the circumstances, Nick. We've had different... we've taken proportionate action, but where someone goes on the picket line, takes camera crews with them, does interviews which weren't booked through the Labour Party machinery, and then makes up policy on the hoof, then the likelihood is they'll get sacked, which is what happened with Sam Tarry.
But someone wanting just to visit their constituents and learn a bit more, that could be tolerated.
Well, our job as politicians is to have a Labour government.
I sense it wouldn't be tolerated.
Well, we look at each case as it comes along. They are different.
All right. Rachel in Bexley is saying, Keir Starmer keeps saying he wants to have a general election. Why doesn't he call for a vote of no confidence?
Well, Nick, I do want a general election.
But why no vote as email us. Text says.
Well, vote of no confidence is one mechanism, but in the end, whether it's a vote of no confidence or whether it's any other vote, it depends on Tory MPs deciding that they will vote with the Labour Party. No, I just want to make sure that we make our best case for a general election. There are Tory MPs already coming out saying, I think there should be a general election. Some of them have been on the airwaves this morning.
Isn't it worth testing the water? You wouldn't. What would you lose were you to go for a no confidence vote?
Well, most of the time with a no confidence vote, unless you get it absolutely right, it ends up uniting the government because they rally around. So this is a careful, decision that needs to be taken in the right way. But the question really is for Tory MPs, which is there's a choice now. Do you put your country first or your party first? And if you'll put your country first, you should have a general election because the public should not be locked out of this. They should have their say. They're entitled to have their say.
Okay. Daniel's in Enfield. Daniel, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Oh, hello, Nick. Hello, Keir.
Hi, Daniel.
No, hello. I've got to see if you've got a backbone here, right? My question is, you, as your party, has said that Liz Truss doesn't deserve that £115,000 a year payoff for crashing the economy, yeah? So I want to see if you actually become leader, you will stop her from being able to claim that money. Would you do that?
Yes, I hope I wouldn't have to, because I hope Liz Truss recognises that having done 6 weeks in the job, it really wouldn't be right for her to take that £115,000 per year for the rest of her life. She's in her 40s. So, yes, I would take that action, Daniel. I really hope Liz Truss reflects on that and decides for herself. I think that's the best thing to do.
That was a yes or a no, and it was a yes. Daniel, thank you. Tricia in Gravesend. Tricia, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Oh, good morning, Nick. Good morning, Sir Keir.
Hi, Tricia.
Oh, good morning. As a floating voter, I would like to know what your personal view and Labour's policy is on immigration.
Yeah, Tricia, my view is that many people who've come to this country have brought wonderful things to this country. And, you know, that is a good thing, but we need immigration rules that are fair and firm. And obviously free movement is now gone. And we should have an immigration system, I think, based on points, depending on what sort of job you might be coming to, etc., etc. I'd also be...
That's what the government has at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, Nick, it was a Labour policy back in the last days of the Labour government. We introduced the point system.
But it is the one we have currently. I stand corrected on that.
No, sorry, Nick, you're absolutely right. Yeah. It is the government's position. Right. We also think it should be a points-based system. Now we don't have free movement anymore. Then you either have a pure numbers game or you have a points-based system that says, well, for certain types of jobs, certain types of roles here, you would get a number of points. I think that makes sense. So in that sense, you know, not a great deal between the major parties on immigration. We would have a slightly different approach, but and I would particularly want to welcome really good students. I feel that over the years we've put good students off coming here, and many of them have ended up going to Australia and Canada and the US. I would want to see the best possible students coming to this country to study. One, because we benefit from them being here, but two, what generally happens is that when that student goes back to the country they came from, they always look to Britain for trading relations and business connections throughout their lives.
Thank you for that. Would you stick with the so-called Rwanda plan, Sir Keir?
No. I don't think that is going to work. I don't see any evidence of that.
What would work with the issue of people crossing the channel illegally?
Oh, I'll tell you what would work. Upstream work to stop those traffickers. Those traffickers are trading in human misery.
Albania and Syria or Calais?
Calais, but by the time it's got to Calais, the problem is very difficult to deal with. It's got to be done upstream. The National Crime Agency has the remit to do that work, working with authorities of other countries. When I was Director of Public Prosecutions, we did these joint operations across borders. They can be very, very effective. That's the way to deal with it, so that we don't actually have people arriving on the north coast of France.
We learnt something last week on this radio show. I happened to be speaking to someone who was at the same school as you. You know him as Andrew. Others know him as Lord Cooper, the former Director of Strategy at Number 10 under David Cameron. He told us this about you.
He was quite different to the personality that people see and criticise today. I see people criticise him for being kind of boring and wooden and things. He was very lively, very sporty, very musical, but a bit of a lad at school. I mean, he was a live wire.
Come on, I tried. He couldn't remember that you ever got a detention, but you were a lad, and if something was going on in the playground, you were at the heart of it. Come on, give us an instance.
He's not completely wrong about that, Nick. I'm going to be on the phone to Andrew the moment I get out of this studio. But
give us an instance. Did you ever get a detention?
I did get a detention, yeah.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
what for?
I did, fighting.
Who did you fight?
I can't remember, but they were always around the back of the
You were a lively
sheds.
lad, weren't you?
There was bits and bobs going on, yeah.
And what was your sport did you excel in? Which sport
Football has always been. And I still play, Nick. I played yesterday for 90 minutes.
How'd you get on?
We won, which is always it's a high mood on a Sunday afternoon if I've won at the football. But what I love about that is it's a group of players I've known for a long, long time. Nobody gives a stuff what you do for a living. It's just whether you're a decent...
into the leader of the Labour Party.
There's a lot of banter, and as you can imagine, a lot of comments.
Staying with football, if England got to the World Cup final in Qatar, would you go?
No, I wouldn't. I'd love to. But I think that the human rights record is such that I wouldn't go, and that will be the position of the Labour Party.
Would you won't go to any of the games whatsoever?
No.
None. And none of your senior colleagues?
No.
Okay. Think about this one. Terry says, talking of votes, I hope Sir Keir votes the right way on Saturday night with Strictly Come Dancing.
Oh, well...
Have you voted for... I think you know of whom we speak.
The Big Tony.
Do you vote for him?
I think I probably would have to, just out of I have to say, he was a fantastic defender. I'm not sure his dancing is up to... You may remember after one of there's a guy called Steve Morrow who was one of the Arsenal players, and after we'd won a particular FA Cup, he picked Steve up and put him on his shoulders and then promptly dropped him and broke his shoulder bone. So I was always a bit nervous when entered that dancing.
Time for two more questions. Mike's in Perth. One from me and one from Mike in Perth. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, Sir Keir, if God help us, you win the next general election, would you keep the triple lock?
Yes, we've always been supportive of the triple lock, Mike. And it's the Conservative Party that have been chopping and changing on that one. They actually had a manifesto commitment to that offence. So if they were to put this up for a vote, new Prime Minister come in and put it to a vote, we would vote to keep it.
There is concern we haven't seen enough of Labour's fiscal plans, how you're going to pay for everything. We hear about windfall taxes, we hear about non-doms, the non-doms being worth, I think, it's a heck of a lot of money, £3 billion. Are all your plans efficiently, effectively, fully costed?
Nick, I was listening to your programme this morning and you had, I think it was Rowena on from somewhere, New Statesman, I think.
Yes.
And you said that Rachel Reeves would be shouting from Leeds.
And I could hear it from Leeds.
Keir Starmer was shouting from Kentish Town, I can tell you that, because everything that we've said that we will do, we have fully costed. So we've said we need more NHS staff, and we've said that'll come from changing the non-dom status. We've said we need better mental health, and we've said that'll come from closing loopholes in private equity. We've said we need better provision in state schools, and we've said that'll come from tax breaks to private schools. So actually, it's not, it's a bit lazy for people to say we haven't fully costed everything. Now, obviously, I accept there's going to be a real mess in our economy when we come in, if we come into government. We're going to have to assess the extent of that. We definitely need this OBR report sooner rather than later. And there will be tough choices. We will have to be the party of sound money. Now, having run a public service and seeing the cuts they've taken in the last 10 to 12 years under this government, I don't think we should be cutting our public services. I think if we cut our health service anymore, it'll be completely face down. But I do accept that some of the things that we would want to do as an incoming Labour government, good Labour things, we may not be able to do as quickly as we might like because of the mess that this government's going to leave us.
Will there be a wealth tax?
Nick, lots of people have different views of what a wealth tax is. I want fair taxes.
So there won't not be a double negative. There won't not be a wealth tax.
We've looked, Nick. The taxes that we've been clear that we want to change, just to be more positive and be clear about it, are a windfall tax on oil and gas companies who are making profits they didn't expect to make. So that is a tax that we would put in place. We would change the non-dom rules. We think it's wrong that people here are paying their tax to other countries when they should be paying them here. And we would deal with the loophole for private equity. So rather than a general, Nick, we have been clear where we're going to change the tax rules. We've set out what we would do and how much we think it would make.
All right. I'm going to finish with a text that's come in. This question has come up. I'll just use Kenneth in Kent's version. I quite like the sound of Sir Keir Starmer, but how could I possibly vote for someone who supports a peerage for Tom Watson?
Oh, look, Tom has been a long faithful servant of politics and achieved many things in his life. And so that is why he's going into the House of Lords, where he will continue that work.
Just days after Lord Britton's death, Mr. Watson described him, who was the most senior army officer in the army, described him as close to evil as any human being could be, quoting Carl Beach, which we all know was a tissue of lies. Lady Britton has described Tom Watson as despicable and offensive. You want him to bear a peerage?
Yes, he has contributed hugely to this country, hugely to politics, and he will continue that contribution in the House of Lords.
How do you think his victims would feel when they see him, the former Conservative MP Harvey Proctor? How do you think these people would feel if, courtesy of you, he's elevated to a peerage?
Nick, I understand there are strong views on this, understandably strong views on this, and Tom himself has addressed it. But Tom has, a lifetime of contribution to this country, and he will continue that in the House of Lords.
Sorry, it was Lord Britton, he said, was close to evil as any human being could be. Totally unsubstantiated.
Well, Nick, as I say...
It was Field Marshal Lord Bramwell, whose elderly wife was moved from room to room as the police searched her house. Again, supported by claims by Tom Watson. Keir Starmer.
Strong views on this, Nick, as you would expect. Tom has made a huge contribution. He will continue that in the House of Lords.
And you are aware of all that? You're aware of the hostility that is out there from a lot of people and a lot of victims' families?
Yes, I am, yeah.
And you take that on board?
Yeah.
So, Keir Starmer, thank you very much for appearing here on LBC, the 9:34. Let's get the latest headlines.
Sir Keir Starmer has told LBC the country must move on from what he called the chaotic circus of the Tory leadership. The Labour leader has urged the Conservatives to back a general election.
The question really is for Tory MPs, which is, there's a choice now. Do you put your country first or your party first? And if you'll put your country first, you should have a general election, because the public should not be locked out of this. They should have their say. They're entitled to have their say.
Rishi Sunak could be declared the next Prime Minister this afternoon. His only rival, Penny Mordaunt, will be out of the contest if she fails to get 100 nominations from